Good morning, everyone, and welcome. For 45 years, we've been holding these conventions where people come to learn, have some fun, and more than that, be at a place where it's okay not to hear well. Thank you to CapTel, Caption Telephone, for sponsoring this general session. It's important to have good partners trying to do what we all want, get people to take their hearing health seriously. Thank you to all our Here for Life partners. Together, we can do the work that impacts the everyday lives of people. Well, we had a busy day yesterday. Our board of directors met, our chapters met in an all-day leadership session. In the evening, we honored our volunteers in the award ceremony, and then we went to a Kentucky Derby-style party. And early this morning, we had the newcomer session. So if you see someone with a yellow dot on their badge, this is the first time that they've come to our convention. So welcome them to the greatest hearing-friendly show on earth. Our HLAA Kentuckiana chapter is your local hosts. And chapters don't just happen. It takes dedicated volunteers. And when chapters become known in their community, people call on them for speakers, as a resource, and sometimes they just want to meet someone who's going through the same thing. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear welcomes you right from the state capitol in Frankfort. It's about 30 quick miles east of here. He has proclaimed this week as Hearing Health Week, recognizing that 700,000 people who live in the state of Kentucky have some degree of hearing loss. The proclamation says hearing aids, cochlear implants, assistive listening devices, captioning, clear masks, telecommunication adaptations, and self-advocacy can greatly improve the quality of life. Well, you've heard it here, folks, right from the bluegrass state. The governor has proclaimed it. Thank you, Governor. But you all know this, right? Last fall, we had a community survey, and many of you participated, and we really appreciate that. There were many, many comments from you telling us that you wished, when you were first diagnosed with hearing loss, that your hearing healthcare provider would have told you about HLAA. Someone actually wrote, "It's a critical moment for connection." And we see how this connection works. I mean, here at the convention, in chapters across the country, in our Walk for Hearing, where we see people of all ages, all levels of hearing loss, and we see the uniqueness of the communities where we walk. So tell others about HLAA, tell them what you know, tell them that we've helped you along your journey. And if you're a medical professional or a hearing healthcare provider, please tell your patients about HLAA. We are really lucky to live in the world 2026. Look at all the technology we have. The technology access at this convention is like none other. Every workshop has a hearing loop, Auracast, and real-time captioning. From hearing aids to cochlear implants to caption telephone and captioning apps and more, technology is our friend, isn't it? Did you know that even pigs get hearing aids? Oh no, it's been proven. I'm telling you. George Pig, the 3-year-old younger brother of Peppa Pig, just got fitted with a hearing aid. Do you see his hearing aid up there? He's so cute. Well, this year, HLA partnered with Hasbro and their animated children's show, Peppa Pig. People across the world got to walk the journey with Mummy and Daddy Pig when their toddler, George, got tested and fitted with the hearing aid. HLAA's partnership with them has been so terrific because Hasbro's focus is on education. So they partnered with HLAA as the trusted voice to produce resources for parents looking for answers to their questions and just wanting to know more information. So if you go to hearingloss.org, you're going to see our brand new family toolkit. And how wonderful for kids to have this character to relate to and for parents to realize that they're not alone. And you might just spot George Pig at a Walk for Hearing. In fact, I think George and Peppa and all the members of the family were in your convention bags, right? I think they're following us everywhere. But we love George Pig and we love Mommy and Daddy Pig, so we're really thankful for this partnership. But I told you, technology is really everywhere and it helps us. In our survey last fall, 96% of the respondents with hearing loss use a hearing device. You told us that you want more practical, hands-on, and in some cases, one-on-one support with your devices. You told us you want programs and content focused on real-world problem solving. So we are very excited about this. Well, not this. This is an elephant, and he is at the National History Museum, which is part of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. HLAA is collaborating on a study funded by the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Technology RERC at Gallaudet, and it's being conducted by two iconic venues, the Kennedy Center and the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The study will examine both the performance of assistive listening systems and the experiences of people who use these systems, and we will have data. So if you plan to visit Washington, D.C., watch for our announcements and consider participating. You can come and test the devices in all the different venues, and you'll help advance our understanding of assistive listening in real-world situations, in cultural venues. And guests from the Kennedy Center and the Smithsonian are here, and they're doing a workshop. And we have more on tech this year. Our research symposium funded by the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders at NIH is about, like everything else, artificial intelligence, this time in hearing health. But we know behind every piece of technology is the human spirit, trying the next best thing, trying anything to stay connected to the people you love and the activities that we love to do. And here's more this morning. Now at this session, we have the experts talking tech and what it means for those of us navigating hearing loss from the minute we wake up till the time we go to sleep. So I would like to welcome our speakers to the stage. Well, it looks like everybody has their places. They have traveled far and wide to be here. And Bridget, you're ready to go?
Ready to rock.
Ready to rock. Bridget Dobyan is the Executive Director of the Hearing Industries Association. HLAA is responsible for more than the 5 million hearing aids sold in the United States every year. So, panelists, this is a tough audience. So have a good time, Bridget.
Thank
There
you
you go.
so much, Barbara. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to HLAA for this phenomenal opportunity. We're really excited to dive in a little bit on the technology that our manufacturers are offering, the way that our retailers are providing these services and administering the technology to serve you as the consumers in the best way possible. So I don't want to take up a lot of time, but with a long intro from me, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Again, these are the best of the best across the entire hearing health industry, so we're so excited to be here with you today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Tedeschi. I'm the Chief Audiology Officer for Amplifon Americas, and I also am the Chairman of the Audiology Academy of the National Academies of Practice in the United States.
I'm Laurel Christensen. I'm the Chief Audiology Officer for GN Hearing.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Dr. Sherry Alley. I'm representing Oticon as the Sales Training Manager. Our CEO of Audiology recently got promoted and moved to Denmark, and she's off living her best Danish life, but we didn't want to miss this opportunity to connect with HLAA, so thank you for having me.
And I'm Dr. Sara Burdak. I'm the Chief Audiology Officer as well as our Executive Vice President of Product Strategy for Starkey. And I'm happy to be here. We're passionate about many of the same things, so thank you for having us.
Hi, my name is Dr. Eric Branda. I'm the head of audiology and research for WS Audiology, if you're familiar with our Signia and Widex hearing aids. And I am very happy to be here with you today.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I think one of the biggest topics on people's minds right now is artificial intelligence. What does it mean? How is it being incorporated into devices? And how is it being incorporated into the service component of hearing health and hearing aids? So Sara, if I could start with you to talk about what is AI and how are you beginning to incorporate through Starkey?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do want to say, Barbara, thank you for talking about this in a way that says technology is our friend, and we need to think of it that way. In fact, at Starkey, we started changing the way we use AI and thinking of it as friendly AI. Can I get a show of hands, though, of how many of you are a bit afraid of it in your hearing technology? Okay, that seems about right. How many of you then, at the same time, you can feel afraid of it, are also excited about it? Yeah, most of you. So that's good. That's good. Now, the one thing I can say about AI is it is not new to any of our technology. We are on our 8th generation of AI at Starkey. So we started with machine learning, which is fantastic, which means we're able to recognize patterns in speech and noise better than we've ever been able to do before. So when you think about everything that we're really, really focused on as an industry, and certainly at Starkey, is it always going to be better speech understanding in the most noisy environments? But what I want to just quickly share with you is we're giving you more tools using AI that help you in the environments that you're in. Your audiologist or hearing healthcare professional can't be with you all the time. You might want us to be there all the time, but we can't be. So giving you some AI tools that you can take control of your own environment is really cool and where we're headed in this industry. And so I think really the goal of AI, again, is to make sure that in any environment, we have as many automatic settings so that you're not having to make a ton of adjustments with your devices, and we can understand the environment better.
Sherry, I'd like to go to you next, sticking with the AI topic and how it's being incorporated, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what artificial intelligence actually is. And Sara just colored a lot of the context in the applications and the settings and making it easier in your everyday life. But can you tell us a little bit more about what AI is and if there are any limitations right now?
Sure. I think AI, I love the questions that Sarah asked because I think that's how we all feel when something is new and you're learning your way through it. I think, to me, there's no limitations of AI. So I'll start at the end and work backwards. I think AI is the generation that we're moving into. For so many years, Oticon, or hearing aids in general, used traditional directionality and used a very specific algorithm as an industry. And we've moved beyond that now. And it's amazing to watch outcomes for patients who do have AI in their devices. I think what I'm looking forward to as a patient myself who has worn hearing aids for many years, what I'm looking forward to is something Sarah touched on, is that I want every patient to have an automatic experience. I love the idea of fit it and forget it, so that you can interact with your environment, whether it's through assistive technology, your hearing aids, the combination of communication skills with your communication partners. There's endless opportunity to make that easier in your everyday life, and that's what we're looking for the manufacturers to do. So we're looking for them to make technology easier, and AI is the route that we're going to do it. Now, when I'm working with patients in the clinic, the question I get is, well, what is AI? How do you explain that to somebody? So I always find a super relatable example, because I think the better that our consumers and patients understand, the easier they can share that with other people who are resistant to hearing loss and treating their hearing aid or treating their hearing loss. So I always use the example of when you're shopping away and your credit card statement pops up and says, oh no, you bought tires in Arizona. You're like, wait, I'm not in Arizona. How does that happen? Many industries use AI for look for patterns. And when there's an anomaly, it can give you an alert. So AI happens to you every day of your life. You may not just realize it and encounter it that way. Data is being dissected at high levels, and humans can't do that. Computers can. And so knowing that the more you explore AI and how it affects you in all the different parts of your life, it gives you more confidence to know that this industry is embracing something that as we get more research, more development, it'll continue to make improvements. But for me and AI at Oticon, what I've enjoyed about their development of AI over the years is the idea that we want it to be automatic, fit it and forget it. It's not something you have to interact with to make it work. It's working. It's the processor of the hearing device. So for me, that idea that no matter what environment you're in, a quiet environment, a really challenging environment, it's always on and available for you and working in that device. Bridget?
Excellent. I'm both encouraged but also a little bit scared when you start talking about all the data slicing that's going on and how much is being collected.
Yeah.
And Laurel, to follow on to that thought, with what's being collected and how we're making sure that we're protecting the patient experience and the patient's healthcare data as we continue to automate to the extent practicable and beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, AI is completely built on data sets. And so you have to have data in order to do things with artificial intelligence. And, you have to be careful that if you do collect that data, it's not going to be ever associated with a name or anything like that. So of course we don't do that, but we do like to collect data. And when you open up many of our apps, you'll be asked to give us permission to collect data so that we can see what's happening in your hearing aids, real time, and that helps us make changes and do things that will help you hear better. If you look at AI inside a hearing aid today, I mean there are many things that are happening in AI. And we've been using, both the previous Sarah and Sherry have talked about that we had AI in hearing aids for a long time, but it's been very general AI. And what's coming now is really what we call deep neural network AI. And it sounds scary, but it's actually quite easy. It's a way that you can train a network, and it's all software, you can train a network to identify speech versus noise. You can train a network to identify the type of environment that you might walk into, so a quiet environment versus a very noisy environment. And AI in that way is being used in different ways. The most powerful AI in a hearing aid today is called denoising. And what happens in denoising is that we train a network with speech and then some kind of background noise. That background noise could be other speech, it could be traffic noise, it could be other kinds of noises that you encounter. But if you do this enough and you train a network, the network will pick out that very loud speech, and you'll be able to separate that speech from the noise. And that's what's incredibly powerful in hearing aids today. But it's in its infancy. It has quite some limitations. The power consumption is very, very high. And actually today there is not a hearing aid chip available to do that kind of denoising. You actually have to have a second chip in order to do it. And so you have to do the denoising on a second chip, and you have to do it in an efficient way and not have too much power consumption. So there definitely are limitations. It is in its infancy, but it has the ability over time to absolutely be able to separate speech from noise. And really take out the background noise. And we're not there today, but I would say within the next 5 years, you will be seeing hearing aids that can absolutely separate speech from noise and take the noise down. And given that that is the #1 problem of people with hearing loss, it does have it has a future that is very bright for hearing and noise.
So shifting away from the device use of AI, and I want to go to Tom Tedeschi for this one, that services component and the utilization of AI. Barbara mentioned in her opening remarks that one-on-one support remains one of the most important pieces of that patient interaction. So Tom, can you talk a little bit about how AI can help enhance and not erode that patient relationship, or if there are concerns out there?
Yeah, so very good question. And what's great is from the Amplifon perspective, we deal basically on the retail side or the patient experience side, where my colleagues, they're all on the manufacturing side. And so now we're merging these two together. So we're taking all the great innovations that are coming in AI, and then we're looking at it and how can we best use it with their patient experience? How can we take this information that the hearing instruments are telling us, and then how can we tell you, the wearer, on how to use it and how it can benefit you in more ways? So another great thing about it is we can look at the data sets that Laurel was just talking about, and we can start to see, okay, we need to make maybe some small adjustments to your hearing aids so that you hear better in all these situations that AI is detecting for you. And so there's a great deal of information that we can glean as clinicians as we work with each of you to try to fine-tune your hearing as best that we possibly can. And what's really phenomenal about AI, and I'm very bullish on AI. I've been in the hearing instruments, been in this field for 50 years, and so to see the transition and all the things that are taking place, AI is very, very exciting. Because as we've just heard, we want to make hearing so natural for you so that you don't have to make changes. You don't have to deal with your apps, and you don't have to deal with all these things that the hearing aid is doing all the work, and you know how to do it. But if you have to make an adjustment, how to do that. The other thing is that the National Academies of Practice, it takes 15 medical disciplines that are all working together. We're actually looking at how does hearing loss and how does helping people hear fit into other areas of medicine? So how does it fit into, and in the academies we have not only physical medicine and surgical medicine, we also have veterinarians in there, and we have dietitians, and we have physical things. And so and they're all learning now, how can we help individuals with hearing loss and with hearing devices work into these other areas that are going around. And AI is hitting all these other industries as much as it is helping us in hearing. And so now we're just has this synthesis of all these professions coming together and working with AI. So AI, don't be afraid of it, and look towards it as a great friend that's coming. You know, in hearing loss, we've always talked about, we wish hearing aids could do these things. And now we're coming to the era where the hearing aids and our cochlear implants, all these devices can do these things. So it's exciting.
We were all just at the American Academy of Audiology conference, I think a month or two ago, and one of the interesting anecdotes that came out of that is that even in the simplest of tasks that your hearing care professional does, AI can actually free up some of their bandwidth to better serve. So instead of them taking an hour to create a Facebook ad to talk about their practice, it takes them 5 minutes to use ChatGPT, and then they're spending those additional 55 minutes in the clinic and with patients instead of on that simple task. So shifting over a little bit about messaging on AI, because we've heard from a couple of our panelists not to be afraid of it. So Eric, going over to you, as we talk about AI with the devices, how are your companies and your brands communicating to the hearing care professionals how to then communicate this technology to patients to best use it?
So yeah, a lot of the communication, I think it's an interesting challenge because we want to make sure the information is accessible to everybody. And it's actually, I find it interesting looking at the ideas of, you know, technology and what AI does, and then looking at social media. We do a lot of social media posts to, you know, communicate what the technologies can do and how to bring that into people's everyday experiences. Because it's something that, you know, I talk to my parents who, you know, they watch the news, they start watching their phones. My dad is on his phone all the time. So looking at where are people looking for information and then how to get that information there, whether it's going to the professional and educating the professional on what the technology is doing, what we can take forward to the communities, but also making sure that it's accessible for anybody who's trying to learn about their hearing loss and about what options are out there. So really diversifying how we can communicate on both sides and do it responsibly to make sure we're talking about what's important and going to bring the most help in a variety of situations.
Before we leave the AI topic, I do want to go back to that point of contact point that you made, Eric, and open this up to the entire panel. Something that we hear there are these incredible features that are being incorporated into devices, and perhaps the use of those features isn't necessarily communicated all the way to the patient or the consumer. So I'll start with Tom, and then we'll go down the line on the way that each of your companies are working with professionals to, again, make sure that consumers know what's available and how to use it.
So one of the great things with AI that's happening, and you even mentioned ChatGPT and things like this, these are tools that we're learning as audiologists to utilize in the office that will help us streamline our diagnosis and our evaluation period. So the faster that we can go through that leaves us more time to explain how to use it in your hearing aids and how to use the apps. And so AI is helping us in streamlining our office time. So now, you know, when you come into the office and you're spending an hour to an hour and a half with us, and, you know, majority of that, a lot of that time is spent on just the evaluation and explaining what's going on. And then to get to your devices, now we can streamline that so much so that we can spend more time in helping you understand. The second thing that does, it allows us to work with ancillary staff within our offices also to start bridging that time so that you can have more face time with your audiologist. And so we can leave a lot of the other stuff that's being done to other people in the office because of AI.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, you know, I'd make 2 points. One that Tom's kind of started to touch on, but in another segment of my life, I actually take care of my mom who has dementia. And so it's very, you know, a lot of doctor's appointments, you know, you're going to. And one of the things that I noticed right away as I'm taking her to doctors is that physicians in general don't look at you anymore. And I imagine that's a huge problem in this room. And they're sitting at a desk typing, and then they ask you a question, and they keep typing, and they ask you a question, and they keep typing. And just recently, I took my mom to see her cardiologist, her heart doctor, and we had seen him many, many times, and I was expecting, well, he'll be sitting at his computer, and he wasn't. He actually was sitting right in front of my mom, talking to her, and I thought, what the heck changed? And he had a speaker that was recording everything in the room, and he said that from the beginning so that, you know, she had to say she was willing to be recorded. But that was taking the notes that he needed, and then he was able to look at my mom and talk to my mom as a regular patient. That's all AI. It just is recording what was happening, and then it took all the notes for him so that he could write his chart notes and do the things he needed to do in the computer system. But he actually could spend some time looking at me and my mom, and I thought that was the greatest use of AI. More to your point on hearing aids, I mean, I think, and two of the other panelists have already said this, I mean, we want to make it automatic. You want it to be very automatic so that we don't have to communicate a lot, that it just works for you. You know, we're not there completely yet. Many of you might be using AI hearing aids today, and one of the things with denoising, so taking out the noise in a hearing aid, is that it will always pick up the loudest speech, and the loudest speech may not always be what you want to hear. And so you might be in a situation where you want to hear the person right across from you, but there's somebody who's louder, maybe at the side, and you hear the person at the side and not the person right in front of you. And so you actually do have to be told about those things today with AI. So as great as it is, it could have you listening to the wrong person, and so you need to know how to get out of that. You need to know how to change a program to maybe just listen to the person you want to hear about. So we're not in the automatic as well as we should be, but I think over time we will, and I think it really is the onus on us as audiologists to communicate that, especially in these very fancy denoising hearing aids, that you may be hearing something you didn't want to hear if somebody is louder in the environment and things. So it's not perfect, but it will get better all the time.
Sherry?
Thank you, Bridget. So to answer the question of how are we educating the professional? And so I think each of us has a team of folks that work at our companies that's their job. That is their job to meet with your local audiologist and give them patient-friendly language so that they can feel confident and comfortable explaining new features that roll out from the manufacturer to you, the end user, the patient. So all of us are working on that. Meetings happen every day of the week. We want to make this easy to understand because a lot of the topics are very complex. And so how do we make that friendly for you? And that's our job. That's what we're supposed to be doing for you. Now, the other part of that is what are the manufacturers doing to help increase awareness and understanding of what we do? Just this last week, the state of Indiana, which is where I'm from, Yale's neighbors, they hosted their state conference. I'm sure Juliet Starkins is in the room somewhere, but Juliet and a local clinician in the state of Indiana did a talk on Auracast. And so part of the presentation was not only from the manufacturers talking about their features, but also educating local professionals about what assistive technology developments have happened. And it was a really lively discussion, as I'm sure you can imagine with audiologists in a room. But I think, our job is to make this easily understood for you when you come in and have these questions for your providers and they are comfortable answering them. So taking out the mystery of AI. And although I agree with Laurel that, AI is certainly not perfect, we're in the stage now where the excitement has finally built and made it, and we're here. But I think no one system is complete. You'll probably hear each manufacturer speak about their system one-on-one, where they could talk about, at Oticon, they offer user intent sensors so that we can have a better understanding of what that patient's trying to experience in that moment. So we each have some additional features in our hearing devices to help complement AI, to give it more information as it's making decisions about processing your specific environment, your preferences, what would work best for you, and also based on your hearing loss. A severe to profound loss is very different than a mild hearing loss, and so the needs of the user are drastically different. And so working with a local provider in your area is the most important thing you can do, and it's our job to keep them educated and up to date on technology. Thank you, Bridget.
Sarah?
So I agree with the automatic nature, and I'm going to keep that pretty short because we've all talked about that, but I just want to share with you the positive outcomes we're seeing is that the change in a memory of your hearing aid, or sometimes they're called programs, is much less than it's ever been today or before today. Now, I've been in the industry a long time. I started with a company that had 8 different programs or memories. It was very cumbersome. So that's huge progress in the technology, but what we are still seeing is the top control that individuals wearing our hearing technologies want is a simple volume control. That's number one. So we are always going to be focusing on how do we make that basic volume adjustment as easy for you to do and easy for you to find. The AI discussion, though, goes a little bit deeper than that. I'm not sure how many of you know we're seeing a shortage of audiologists. We're seeing a shortage of hearing healthcare professionals. I'm seeing a lot of you doing some big nods here. So we have to think about how we're going to be implementing AI clinically and how we're going to get to a better, best fit of the hearing technology right away so that we can focus on counseling and the things that matter the most. One of the areas, too, that we haven't spoken about that we're really focused on is how we're using AI in the telehealth or teleaudiology space. Again, with your partnership, you have to give us the permissions to do these types of things. But we are looking at how can we make sure that especially somebody who's new to hearing technology is having a really good experience over the first 2 weeks of that fitting and how they're adapting and getting acclimated. So we're thinking about data logging, for example. What if we give somebody hearing technology and we know 4 days later they have never used it yet? Something's wrong. And we've worked really hard to get somebody to a professional. We're seeing a big decline, huge progress. It used to be 7 to 10 years before somebody would actually take action. Now we're seeing it between 4 and 5 years. So that's a significant change that we've seen. People are taking action earlier. So our goal is how do we make every single encounter with somebody that has a hearing problem, how do we make it count? And one of those ways is thinking about how we integrate AI into the entire fitting experience and how we ensure once people leave our offices that they're still getting the support they need through that life cycle of that hearing aid. So there are just unique ways to think about AI in those types of situations that I think will continue to evolve and really progress well into the future.
So I think back to Bridget's question on how we're training and getting information to the audiologist and working with the patient, because I look at this with my own family's healthcare and that provider and patient relationship, it is very individualized and very personal. So everybody has different needs, different requirements. So we do a kind of, Sherry mentioned that we've got a team that will go in and they will train the audiologist on all the different aspects of the technology. To the audiologist's disadvantage, they probably hear that from each one of our companies. But we do get in front of them and teach them all the different pieces so when they're working with the patient, they can very precisely choose what is the right thing for this patient, because we want automatic. You want to go in, you want the hearing aid to adapt to each situation you're in. You may not want to touch it and hands off, and that is great for the person who doesn't want to touch it. And there's somebody else that's going to pull out their phone and they want to play. They want to get in that situation and they want to play, they want to know how to play. And they'll get in there and start making those adjustments. Or there's a way we can tie in the technology. We use an AI in our hearing aids that is very user interface, in that when there's a situation that the hearing aid can't adapt to, well, you can go in there and talk to a chat with it, and because you can't call up your audiologist and say, I'm in a noisy situation, it's probably about 74 dB SPL, and my partner's speaking at 68 dB, and what do I do? You don't have that option, but the hearing aids can detect that. The app can use AI to work with that and help provide a solution there to address that situation. Somebody may want to use that, somebody else may not want to. So we make sure that the audiologist knows what options are in there, so that then when they're working with the patient directly, they can cater it to the patient's needs and provide that individualized professional relationship.
So I think we're going to leave the land of AI. We spent a good bit of time on that, but it's certainly one of the most emerging and potentially confusing areas, but there's clearly a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of data behind it being implemented to, again, make these devices the best that they can be for your experience. So as we shift over from AI, Sherry actually teed this up beautifully into a discussion around Auracast. And we know that the rooms here are equipped with Auracast, and Barbara Kelley mentioned the partnership with the Kennedy Center and the Smithsonian Institution to test out all of these new accessibility potentials, as well as the existing components. So Laurel, I want to start with you. Where are we with Auracast?
Well, Auracast is definitely in its infancy. I mean, can I ask how many of you might be using it right now? So there are a few. That's great. So it is in its infancy. If you don't know kind of the background behind Auracast, what happened was the European Hearing Aid Manufacturers Association, so it's kind of the European version of what Bridget runs in the United States, the Hearing Industries Association. They actually went to the Bluetooth organization, so the Bluetooth Special Interest Group, and said, we need a new Bluetooth standard for hearing loss, and that was what they asked for. Because Bluetooth, as you use it in your cars or you use it with your computers, standard classic Bluetooth is very power heavy. It takes a lot of power to run it, and that's not a great thing for a tiny little hearing aid. And so we asked Bluetooth if they would have a lower power Bluetooth that also had audio, because you already had Bluetooth low energy, but it didn't have audio in it. And we also asked them if you could do a public broadcast system with it. And so we asked this back in 2017. Around 2020, during the pandemic, is when Bluetooth actually put out the new Bluetooth standard. So it's Bluetooth low energy audio, and that comes with Auracast. So it's something that Bluetooth did so that it is a standard for everyone, not just people with hearing loss, which is fantastic. So many of you sitting out there have that standard already in your hearing aids if you're using Auracast today. But it's also in headphones, it's in cochlear implants, it's going to be everywhere. So anyone will be able to use it and connect into it. So, where is it today? Well, you have companies, Listen Technologies, Amplitronic, you guys will have to.
There's
Yeah,
a lot.
anyway, there are a lot of companies with with public systems that you can put into public areas, and then you can stream the Auracast. If you're not familiar with it, you can just find a stream on your device, any of your Android phones that are modern will have the Auracast stream on them. Apple hasn't quite put it in there yet, but we hope that they will soon. But if you have an Apple phone, you can often get it in our app with Resound. You can get it in our smart app, and you can just have the stream and choose it. So, the benefit of it, is it will work well with telecoil and with looping. It will work well with all of that. So it can be layered on that. But the sound quality is much better. And we now have research showing that the sound quality is much better. I have been able to be in a couple of these sessions at Lincoln Center in New York City, where we bring in people with hearing loss, and they are having Auracast streamed, for the orchestra, for the concerts, and it's amazing. I mean, tears are streaming down people's faces because the sound quality is absolutely unbelievable with this new Bluetooth standard. So, I would say that one of the best things for us to do that advocate for these things, it is to be advocating for them. On the Bluetooth website, you can actually get entire packages of information on how to advocate for Auracast in your community, how to get it into your movie theaters and into your performance theaters, how to get it into your churches. I've actually installed it in a church. I've watched it be installed in many places. It's much simpler to install than a teleloop, and it's way more affordable to install than a teleloop. So I think it's going to bring accessibility to everyone like we've never seen before. But we have some years, I think, before we're going to be able to walk in anywhere and see it.
Sherry, I saw you nodding with the better sound quality overall. Do you want to add on to that?
As a user, it was a completely amazing experience. Of course, clearly Oticon has it in their products, or I wouldn't be probably as excited about it as I am. But as a user myself, I'm a big one for your own advocacy. No one's going to do anything for you 9 times out of 10. So you need to jump in feet first, figure it out, go for it, and ask for what you want. That's always been my mantra as an audiologist and as a patient. So Auracast seemed a little like when y'all raised your hands about AI. When we first started talking about Auracast, I probably would have raised my hand for that too. And then I thought, well, that's not going to stop me from figuring out how to make this thing work for me. So you can even buy a transmitter on Amazon for $50. So we're not talking about a large investment to try and get started and get comfortable. So I ordered the little thing on Amazon. I plugged it into my home TV. I paired my hearing aids to it. And like Laurel explained, also Oticon has an assistant in their app where you click it, it shows you all of the available things you can log on to. You just click it, stream started. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it sounded so different to me. And so my personal experience was like, I love music, I love movies. And so to feel more connected because of the music, like when you're watching something, and I'm a bit of a crier, so, when amazing things are happening and the music's going and I just feel myself tearing up, and it was like I remembered before. And so I don't want, just because you're a little nervous about it, if you may be, don't let that stop you. Now, I will say audiologists have a long way to go of understanding it and being advocates for it, because I think they're like us. They get a little nervous when something's new and different. The conference I mentioned that I was at last week, the room was really divided on, is it here today? Because they've been talking about it for years. So I personally think it's here. It's not going to be in large-scale venues at the moment, so that part is true. That's probably going to take a few more years to happen, but it can happen for you tomorrow. So if you want it in your home, you can do that tomorrow. I just encourage you to ask questions, ask your audiologist about it, and if they're not educated, then tell them to speak with one of their manufacturer partners, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of great information for them. But it's well worth it, and to kind of sum it up, who streams more? So if you're thinking about your phone, what population streams the most? It's kids. Kids love. They will stream something all day long. So I got a peek at some research Oticon was doing, and they, of course, were working with children. We have a pediatric product, so we do have a lot of work done with children as well at Oticon. And I can't remember the percentages off the top of my head, but they were listening to classic Bluetooth as a stream. They were listening to LE audio as a stream, and universally they picked LE audio as having the better quality. And if you think about it, the standards for original Bluetooth were established back in 1993. I was 13 years old. So of course, technology has progressed since that time. So I really encourage you, don't be scared of it, go for it. It's not a huge investment to give it a shot. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you. I'm also a crier with movies, so I get it. When we're talking about this transition to Auracast and something that is really exciting and can make things easier, Sara, can you talk a little bit about that transition to make sure that no one's being left behind with current devices and current capabilities?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because one of the things that we've had to really focus on, similar to the AI discussion, was making sure all the professionals fully understand Auracast capability, but all of the other capabilities as well. So we're demoing Auracast all the time. We at our classes for professionals, we're bringing the transmitter so that they can experience it. So I wholeheartedly agree that the sound quality is better, the battery performance is better, even the latency, so that you're not getting things like lip syncing effects, is better than what we've had previously. But we know we have to still be holistic. So we still then look at what are we offering from the telecoil space. We have our facilities looped as well. This is also another area where I would like to say, if you are not familiar with the accessories that are available with your hearing technology, that might be something that you want to talk to your hearing healthcare professional about. This audience in particular, again, back to all of this technology is our friend, is really the group that is advocates for this and making sure that you're using every single possible tool to your advantage when you need to hear better. So I just focus really on all of the things that are going to give you the best opportunity to have the best speech understanding when you want it and the best comfort when you want it. And I agree with what everyone has said. Auracast is going to be years in the making. It's very, very exciting. We're making really good progress. We've got a lot of bigger names in tech that know about it, which is going to allow it to become more mainstream, but at the same time, we still need to use all the tools in our tool belt.
So Sara kind of transitions this really well into that very customized solution. And Eric, I'll go to you with this one. We all expect that our technology will adapt to our unique levels of hearing loss, our lifestyle, our budget, even just our sense of style with colors and form factors. So can you talk about what WS is doing in this space to really, again, meet consumers where they're at to have that unique experience?
Yeah, we have an interesting opportunity in that we do have two main hearing aids with Widex and Signia, and they both process in very, very different ways. And I relate that to, we need to make sound audible, yes, but they're gonna get there in different ways. When I cook dinner right now, I have an electric stovetop that I can cook on. My previous house, I had gas. Both of them, as you know, work completely differently, but at the end of the day, I can make dinner for my family. So in our hearing aid space, we have two different ways of processing. Frequency processing as well as time domain processing. And that's getting into the technical engineering side of it, but at the end of the day, we can make the sound audible, but there are differences in how we do that. So we also find that some people gravitate or have a preference for how one processor is working, where others have a preference for how the other processor is working. So we're able to start now letting you do an in-office listen to it and what sounds better to you. Because if I can find something that sounds better in the processing, the way it's handling the sound, well, if I look at that steps of getting used to the hearing aid technology, then I can shorten that time frame. If you already have a proclivity to how that sounds, then waiting to get used to it and the time it can take, well, we shorten that. And that reaches success and better acceptance of the hearing aid for the patient in a quicker way. And that's gets us to hearing happier sooner.
That's great. Let's go actually just this way down the line, and Eric, I'll give you another opportunity to layer onto that. Talk about one very exciting new feature that is coming that you can talk about, of course, or that's out there, and what folks should be looking for. You want to start?
I took a drink of water
Take
there.
a drink.
So I think we've talked a lot about, we brought up that speech and noise is one of the biggest challenges. And one aspect we look at as speech and noise is also multiple talkers, because if you think about what you've heard on speech and noise and what you've heard from your audiologist and what we've talked about, we always start bringing it down to like a one-on-one conversation. But if you have multiple talkers, then do I need to turn my head? Did I miss the beginning of what somebody said? Oh, now that person's talking, I've got to turn and try to catch that. Or do I start to relax my directionality and hear all my talkers in front of me, including the noise behind them? These are some of the challenges we've historically faced in multi-talker situations. So one of the features I'm really excited about that we've added in is now, instead of having your directional beam, and I think everybody's probably familiar with directionality where it does focus on what's in front and what's behind, well, now I can have more individual beams on the individual talkers. So if I'm in a multi-talker situation, I can have one beam on the person in front of me, one beam to the person next to them, and one to the third person. I mean, just think about any of your interactions with friends, because you've got multiple people, and there's always noise behind them. So now I can start to cut that out, focus on them, and adapt for that person that's in the beam. So maybe I've got, somebody that's a soft talker. They kind of talk a little low. I don't want to miss that, so I can focus on giving more amplification for them. And then somebody else that's already talking louder, I can keep them amplified appropriately while still suppressing that noise between them and the noise behind me. So it really opens up that multi-talker situation, which just takes that understanding speech and noise is difficult, understanding multiple speakers in noise is difficult, and now we have a more advanced way to address that and make it easier to understand.
Great. Sarah, innovations?
We have onboard sensors in our hearing aids, and the thing that I get really excited about is how we're using that with our gyroscope on our hearing aids to really understand motion-based signal processing strategies. So imagine we can identify then better if you happen to be walking on a busy street. And maybe at that point again, we talk about being safe, healthy, and independent, as long as you can be. Maybe in that particular situation, instead of the hearing aids being in directional mode, maybe they should be in a more surround mode so that you feel confident being able to hear a car coming up from behind you. The same sensor technology is also motion-based with things like being on a bike. And we want to engage our wind noise algorithm, for example. So when you think about getting more and more personal in the way we're fitting, this motion-based technology really, really is significant in the way we're engaging and turning on our signal processing algorithms. I will say we also have what I consider to be life-saving tools. With these sensors, we know that individuals with hearing loss are more prone to falls. So we have integrated fall alerts on our hearing devices. Our goal, though, at Starkey would be to prevent a fall from ever happening in the first place. So we continue to evolve this motion-based technology with tools like balance assessments, as well as balance builders, because we really look, again, I've mentioned this already, but holistically, we know hearing loss is associated with so many other comorbidities, and so we're just thinking bigger and more broadly with what we can do with these built-in sensors on our devices.
Sherry?
Thank you, Bridget. I hate to say the word again, but since we left it behind 15 minutes ago, but for us, it's AI. For Oticon in particular, we've had user intent sensors, which we've addressed a couple of briefly up here already, in that as somebody with hearing loss, I know it's difficult when there's a lot of people talking and you're trying to isolate who you're listening to. So part of what Oticon sensors offer is they assess head movement. So are you not moving and having a one-on-one conversation? I'm looking at this gentleman in front of me. Or is it more like this scenario where I'm turning between Sara and Laurel to make sure that I am a part of the conversation? So how do we change our open platform? So we process a little bit differently, but it's taking into account what you need as the user with user intent sensors. But I got to go to a meeting recently that normally I wouldn't be at, and I saw some of the future plans for AI, and my little eyeballs were as big as they could be. I was like, ooh, that sounds so amazing. And so I think what Oticon's mission statement is as a company is that our main job is to address speech and noise improvement. The accessories, the Auracast, all of those other things are very wonderful complements, but it doesn't change the fact that at Oticon, we prefer our hearing aids to be automatic and address the number one issue that patients are dealing with. So I think in the future, not too distant future, you'll see the continued improvements in the AI space for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, I would probably stay on the topic that Sherry said. I mean, hearing and noise is still the biggest problem, and it's the one we have to work on the most. So that's where our investment goes. You know, we are a company doing denoising today, but like I told you before, that deep neural network denoising will pick up the loudest speech in the environment. So solutions that we're working on are things like coupling the denoising with a very narrow directional beam. And I'm not a big fan of sensors in hearing aids. They actually take more power than they do much benefit to, because you don't need a sensor, because you naturally will look at exactly what you want to hear. So you're going to instantly turn your head and look at what you want to hear. And if you have a directional beam activated in the hearing aid, that directional beam, of course, will pick up that sound. So there's a lot of power spent on something that you really don't need, because if all you're just going to do is look at what you need, that directional beam is going to help you. So what's difficult, and it's extremely difficult, is coupling the deep neural network technology with a directional beam. Those are things that are very difficult from a sound quality perspective, from an artifact perspective, and so that's something that we're trying to get right. Is to be able to use those two technologies at the same time, so that whatever you're looking at will give you that hearing and noise benefit. So those are the kinds of things we're doing in the future. The other thing I would just note is that we actually just a few weeks ago put out an app for Auracast for anyone. Because what you find is that Auracast is in a lot of our company apps where you can go and find your Auracast stream. But if you're someone trying to find an Auracast stream with, some other kind of headphone that has low energy audio, if you have an Apple phone, that's a real problem. And so we just put out an app where you can find an Auracast stream whether or not you have a hearing aid or not. And so that's another thing that we wanted to just bring Auracast to everyone for the time being until we do see Apple put that in their devices.
Great. And then Tom, from a different perspective, in the provision of care, how do we continue to evolve to provide the best services?
Great question. So you've heard my colleagues all talk about the devices and all the different innovative technologies that are coming out in the devices, but what about the professional? What about the person you're actually working with? As an audiologist, we work with all these different companies. And so all the different nuances that these companies have, we just don't concentrate on one company. Your providers are usually working with several companies. And so they have to amass all this information on what each company does, how their software works, how each of those work, and then incorporate it into you and how we can spend more time with you. And so the first thing that we need to really work on is how do we free up more time in our clinics to work with you on understanding what it is. The second way, I'm going to kind of veer off a little bit, Bridget.
Go for it.
And I work a great deal in my role in public policy. I work with Bridget a great deal in public policy. And so how do we get the government, and how do we get our state governments and everything in line with what's going on with hearing health care? How can we get more, services for hearing health care? How can we get more awareness of hearing health care and the comorbidities within the medical community that goes along with hearing health care? Hearing loss is just one particular aspect, as you well know, but it affects lives in many, many different ways that people don't understand. And the other thing is that 10,000 people a day turn 65 in the United States. That 10,000 people are entering in, and more than that, are entering into the hearing handicapped world. How do we make them aware of what's available to them, and how do we make hearing healthcare more appreciable for many people? And so that is one policy, and one thing that we need to work on is education. Education not only in the masses, but education for our professionals. And so when you work with your professionals and you hear some of these great innovations that we're talking about this morning, talk to your professional about, hey, I heard about this, what can you tell me? As Laurel mentioned, Oracast is in its infancy. A lot of audiologists do not have a great understanding of Oracast. But tell them that you want them to learn about it, that you want to know more about it for yourself and for their patients. And so you can be an advocate also to your professional. And so working with them, realizing that your professional has a lot of things coming at them from many different directions, but with innovation comes knowledge. And so trying to assimilate that knowledge and also working in a clinical practice every day, it takes a lot of time. And so I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I went around it a lot. So.
I'm glad you brought up public policy. I was biting my tongue not to do that this entire time. But as we talk about coverage programs, I do want to put Tom on the spot a little bit. First, how many veterans are in this audience? Thank you for your service, first of all. The VA has an incredibly robust hearing health program. It's one of the programs across the US government that's actually looked upon favorably. It operates well. Tom, can you tell us a bit more about that program and what is offered and how to access?
So yeah, I'm a veteran. I served in the Army. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and so I do have some hearing loss due to my experience in a war zone, and so the VA offers us as veterans hearing help, and it's sometimes complicated at times, but and so for most of you, those of you who are veterans, the best way is to go to a VA agency. You'll get a caseworker, and then they'll start to work with you as far as providing hearing help for you and for what you need. There's the number one, you may not know this, but the number one service related injury for military people is tinnitus. And I always tell people when you're in the military, it's not a quiet situation that you're in. And when you're in a combat situation like I was in for a great portion, so some of you who watch the war movies and stuff, I was with the 101st Airborne Division. And so we parachuted a lot and things like that. But we're around a lot of noise. And, you can't hold on, stop making noise. I got to put my hearing protection in. We didn't have that opportunity. And so for veterans, yes, seek out a VA counselor, and they will help you not only with hearing problems, but also with a lot of other issues you may have that are service-related. And so.
Great, thank you. So we are somehow getting close to the end of our time, but we certainly cannot adjourn without talking about cochlear implants. And Sara, I'd like to go over to you with some new partnerships and maybe some struggles that are currently ongoing in the CI space.
Yeah, I think this is such a hot topic, and some of the areas of focus as far as where we're going in the future, well, one of the hottest is really thinking about how do we get to fully implantable devices. That's something that I think is going to be ongoing and integrated into the future. But another challenge that I continue to hear about is having differences in the hardware. So there's a lot of conversations today around, well, how can we make it easier to upgrade hardware, have matching performance? And one of those areas with our partnership with Medell, for example, and I know they have a booth here, so you can certainly stop by and ask more questions about this, is really in that bimodal space. How are we able to work together? Because a cochlear implant technology and our hearing aid technology is vastly different. They have different coding, they have different transmission requirements. And so when you think about really what bimodal means is we're always seeking to do a better job so that you have a feeling like the audio processing that you're getting is in sync. So there's a lot of really positive things coming in the cochlear implant space. So as I said, thinking not only about the cochlear implant in a situation connecting and working together with hearing aids, but also just in the way that we're applying surgical intervention. This is an area where there's a lot of discussion as well about using AI and thinking about how you're getting the placement with electrode technology. All of that capability, I think, is really, really on the cusp of some great new things.
Great, thank you. So we do have some questions that were provided to us with feedback from members to the HLAA National Office. So we'll go ahead and throw these out to the panel. It's a free-for-all, okay? Can hearing loss affect memory or brain health? Laurel?
Well, so, we know from first really the Lancet report that has come out now 3 times that hearing loss is the #1 modifiable risk factor for dementia. That doesn't mean that if you have hearing loss, you're going to get dementia. That definitely doesn't mean that. But it means that it is one thing that needs to be taken into account, and more people really need to understand that having an untreated hearing loss, could contribute to cognitive decline. So, the company that I work for, GN Hearing, we actually have been doing an above brand initiative called Listen to This. And so there's a website, listentothis.com, for consumers to go and learn more, not only about how hearing loss and cognition might be, linked together, but about mental health and hearing loss. And, Tom already mentioned, hearing loss can impact overall health in many, many ways. And so, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is just educate people about the importance of doing something about your hearing loss, for many reasons. But I don't think that we have a lot of causal kind of things that having a hearing loss will cause dementia. We also don't have great evidence that putting a hearing aid on will make it so that you don't get cognitive decline. The biggest study out there is the ACHIEVE study, which was a study done through Johns Hopkins where they fit, many people with hearing loss and then watched over time. What they did find was that a group with more risk factors, they had really cardiac kind of risk factors, they actually did see less cognitive decline in that group when fit with hearing aids, but the general population in that study did not find it. But then we're seeing in a lot of other studies, maybe not as well controlled studies, but we're seeing in a lot of studies less cognitive decline over time when you treat your hearing loss with a hearing aid. So I think those are just things that are emerging in research and things that we need to educate the general public about where hearing loss is concerned.
There's some there's some very good studies coming out of Boulder, Colorado, and out of some research centers in Paris looking at brain health. And if we look at those, my Ph.D. actually is in health sciences and neuroanatomy. And so if we look at these MRI studies that are being done, people that have, without hearing loss, we have, I'm going to start drawing in the sky now, but we have the auditory center of the brain. And when we look at PET scans and different types of scans of stimuli coming in or hearing, the auditory cortex lights up very nicely. And what we start to see is that as people start to lose hearing, we start to see other parts of the brain start to light up. We start to see, the olfactory section where we're looking more visual cues to see, we see with lip reading. We start to see more of the different areas of the brain start to light up. Well, that means that more of the brain is working to help us hear, but what that also is indicating that we're using up more power of our brain. We're using up what we call more cognitive space, and so that makes us tired. And it starts to get into what we call a cognitive overload. But now what we've seen on these scans is that as people start to wear hearing aids and over extended period of time, we start to see the olfactory lobes, these parts of the brain, start to have less input because the auditory part of the brain is picking up more and starting to use more. And so we're starting to see less of that cognitive overload. And so that's one thing that we're seeing anatomically happening in the brain today with the use of hearing and hearing help. The other thing that we see, as Laurel mentioned, as we mentioned earlier, are some of the comorbidities that exist with hearing loss. So, social isolation, and folks that that are not utilizing their hearing properly, they start to isolate. They don't want to go to different things. And so that affects their overall health. So we're starting to see a great deal of these interactions happening with individuals who need to have more hearing health care. And that's why the devices that are being developed today are helping take away that overload and helping it make people become more interactive and keeping them healthy.
Excellent. Any other thoughts on brain health?
Yeah, actually, one of the studies Tom just mentioned, I was jumping right back, came to mind right away where we saw some shifting from the unaided ear to the visual cortex, and when they aided it, we saw kind of shifting activity back to the auditory cortex. I mean, well-fitted hearing aids changing the brain, and I just love the way all the interaction works, and so just building on that.
Sarah?
And I'll just add, we have a unique app that's for the caregivers. I've had a lot of similar experiences from my mom having dementia and wanting to ensure that she was getting up every day, having some social engagement every day. So we look at, are you having some meaningful moments that also allow that information to be sent to a caregiver if that's of interest, because, like many of us, I'm part of the sandwich generation where I'm raising, my kids and I feel like helping my parents at the same time. But we felt so strongly at Starkey that this social engagement piece is really significant in ensuring that we are trying to stave off, social isolation and loneliness. It can start to create sort of this downward spiral that we're all trying to avoid.
So we are very close to time, but there are two simple but very important questions to wrap up our rapid fire. The first one is, where should I sit in a restaurant to hear the best? Anyone? We had an audience response of away from the kitchen. Outside.
It's such a good question.
I think it depends on your technology and what accessories you have available to your situation. So I think whatever package of products you've been fit with, it's a wonderful discussion to have with your provider who uses best practices. They will give you the idea and the concepts of each of the manufacturers. Whichever one they have chosen for you may affect their recommendation on as to where you are best positioned in a restaurant.
I mean, it is such a good question and a very difficult question to answer. Because you might think you want your back to a wall or in that area, but you have to detect noise from the back in order to turn on directional microphones for the most part. So if there is no noise to your back, it won't trigger and it won't automatically turn on. So, I mean, it is a very interesting question that's very difficult, and Cherry's exactly right. It depends on what you have in your technology in order to where to say it. You know, I was in Nashville this week, just hanging out with one of my daughters since I had to be here in Louisville. And I went into a restaurant with her, and I do wear hearing aids today in noise. But I went into a restaurant with her without my hearing aids. And I thought, oh my gosh, no one could survive here with any hearing loss at all. I could not hear her, and I don't think it mattered where I was sitting. I would never have gotten any benefit in that. It was this cocktail party effect. It was so loud that we were almost having to yell at each other. And I don't think anyone with any hearing loss could have probably made it in there without maybe a spouse mic, where you could have handed the microphone to my daughter and had it stream directly into my ear. I think that's the only thing that would have helped.
So it was a simple question, but not an easy one.
Yeah.
One thing so last Saturday, and you just brought this to my mind, last Saturday my best friend and his wife and my wife and I were at a outside restaurant, and my friend has just started wearing hearing aids. And so we were sitting there and talking, and I could tell he looked like a deer was lost in the headlights. You know, he's looking all around the place, and so I finally said, Jerry, what's wrong? He says, well, I hear all these other people, but I can't hear you guys. And I said, oh. And so they all look at me like, okay, Tom, take care of this. And so I finally said, Jerry, give me your app. And so he hands me his app. I said, okay, let's do a couple things. So I actually took the time to show him. I said, here's some things on your app. And I'm not the most proficient with all of my colleagues' different apps that they have, but I happen to have known this app pretty well. And so I just had to take some time to show him, say, here's how you make the adjustments to do this when you're in these situations. So sometimes maybe the answer to your question too is talk to your professional and tell them I'm having troubles in the restaurant. What can you suggest I do?
I think the answer is more be friends with an audiologist. That might be it. All right, so I want to give our panelists each an opportunity for some closing thoughts. Let's start with Tom, since he had that excellent answer right off the end before I turn the podium back over to Barbara.
My closing comment would just be, wow, what a blessing it is to live at this time in history and technology. There is, 50 years when I first started in this industry as an audiologist, we had little screwdrivers that you would try to adjust your hearing. And, and then we told people a lot of times, get used to it. That's the best we can do. And today you're hearing all of these wonderful advances that are taking place, and advances are taking place so fast and so quick for us. It's just what a blessing it is. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for the future in helping people hear better and what is on the horizon. So that would be my closing.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think Tom kind of took my closing. I think I haven't been 50 years, but I have been in the industry 36 years, and I've spent almost all 36 developing hearing aids. So I don't just talk about them. I am in product development for Resound and have been in R&D my whole career. And watching what is happening right now is unreal. We can really help people hear in almost all situations that they go into today if you take into account all of the accessories and everything. I do think AI 100% is the future, but what Tom's friend was experiencing there is often what you experience with AI today. You don't hear what you want to hear. You hear the loud person next to you or something like that. So we still have some ways to go with, getting all of these things right. But we are in a place with hearing today that I certainly, at the age of 25 when I started this would never have thought we would get to. And the last thing I'll leave you on is I've become quite an Auracast advocate because I really have seen a difference that Auracast has made, and I hope that you guys will take that to your communities and make sure that we start getting. Sherry, when you said Auracast is today and you can have it in your house, I was like, that is the best answer ever.
You're welcome.
Because Auracast is here today. And you can stream your TV through Auracast today and do all of those things. But to get it into your communities, it's going to take all of us in order to be out there and advocating it for, in Colorado Springs where I live, there's the Ford Amphitheater, and I think they're going to come arrest me because I have emailed them at least 50 times that they need Auracast. So, I think we need to be out there, though, advocating for those. And otherwise, thanks for having us, because this is probably one of the best things that we get to do is talk to you all every year.
I think from Oticon, I'm going to set the technology aside. I don't work in the audiology department, and I'm sure if you had someone in development, they could share all the amazing things. But I think I want to speak to you as a patient first and a provider second. And I said this to Bridget right before we got started. I said, of course, thank you for having us, because this, to me, is one of the most important things that we can do, and that's education. As a patient and a provider, I think it's really important to know that that circle exists. We don't exist without you and your needs for us. And then the manufacturer doesn't exist because there aren't audiologists or patients that need our help. And so the goal clearly for Oticon is to deal with the biggest issue you're dealing with, which is speech and noise improvement. But on a personal note, I thank you for your time and commitment to coming to events like this and working on advocacy. We need you. As Laurel mentioned, we need you to advocate in your communities. Hold your audiologists accountable for learning about what's latest and greatest in the field, and we appreciate your support. So thank you for having us.
And I will say, we need to leave here with the message that hearing aids and cochlear implants are cool. Me too. We do. And we laugh, but I will say that's probably the biggest job we have to do, is getting the word out. At Starkey, we talk about hearing better is to live better. But the more we can talk about this technology that's incredible and in meaningful ways, and how much it's changed over the last several years, I get very frustrated when I'm at an event and somebody says, oh, I tried hearing aids 10 years ago and they didn't work for me. We have to really let people know this technology is incredible, but it's also the highest technology really out of any other. Can't even compare it to a consumer electronic device. You cannot compare it with what we're doing with AI, with what we're doing with deep neural networks. And so this collective partnership and what we're doing is really the way to change the stigma associated with wearing hearing aids and having cochlear implants. So thank you for your partnership, and thank you for allowing us to be here.
Yeah, I start thinking about I geek out on the technology. I love the tech we put in the hearing aids, and I've been around doing this for a while, and I think one of the really coolest parts of the change and progression is that, okay, there's understanding speech and quiet. I won't say that's easy. The hearing aid still has to do a lot for that, but we can address speech and quiet. But then we get a new situation, speech and noise, speech with multiple talkers, impact sounds, motion, all these challenges that have been there for the past 30, 50 years, that's just always been there. We keep finding new ways to address them, and that keeps building on so that no matter what you're doing in your everyday life, there's a feature that can start helping with that. I make an analogy with lane control in your car. You're driving your car and maybe you get a little distracted, you start to shift lanes a little bit and your car reacts and brings you back. You don't need that feature at any other point when you're driving. But when you do need that feature, it's there and it gets you back on track. And that's what I love how we keep building up in the technology and our hearing aids, that we can keep you on track with hearing in your everyday lives in every situation. So thank you.
So on behalf of HIA, thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here. It was a pleasure to convene these top-notch professionals to talk about what's happening in the hearing health and hearing tech space. I believe that most of them will be able to stick around for just a couple minutes to answer questions. But with that, thank you, and I'll hand it back over to Barbara.
I'm here, but don't go away. Don't go away. Thank you so much. You know what? This has been so cool. I just have a couple takeaways. Everyone wants sound quality, whether you have hearing loss or not. And I think the research and development that your companies are doing is going to benefit the world. Sometimes it's about hearing enhancement. Sometimes it's about hearing loss or hearing health. And I want to really appreciate you bringing the topic of advocacy up. One of our missions at HLAA is advocacy and public policy, and we have worked together with the Hearing Industries Association on some issues, even at the state level, and of course, we joined together to try to get Medicare coverage for hearing aids and services. There will be a time and place when that happens. It's not right now, but we continue to chip away at that. And we are on the Hill all the time, and we appreciate the partnerships that we have with you. The message that we give to people who come to us wanting to know what to do about their hearing loss is we say, if you think you have a hearing loss, run, don't walk to go get tested and treated if you need it. Now, all of you in the room know that, but tell your families and friends that, because we often hear, well, I'll wait till it gets worse. But why wait? Look at the technology that we have. Maybe you don't want to wear hearing aids, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, but maybe you need it in certain situations. So this is just so excited. And I just have one question, Bridget. We've got the brain trust here, right?
We do.
I want to know which one of your companies fit George Pig with the hearing aid. Well, anyway, we're going to close out. I'll tell you what. You can tell me later, okay? Yeah, okay. So we just want to close out. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, the panel. Thank you to all our partners who support all of us while we're here at this convention. This is your time. Go soak it up. Have some fun. We've got the exhibit hall that's going to open next. And thank you for being here. Goodbye, everybody.